Space flyers of the Alpha Corps. Captain! Captain! Echoed in panic. The energy shield of our ship has collapsed. Energy jets are hitting us directly. Where's the answer? Where's the salvation? Feverishly ran through his mind. Alpha Rift? Inverse phase shift? Wormhole. Captain, Captain, Captains. Space date, Zenith 22-215-421. Planet Odtion, dust and quartz, the planet that burns. The planet Odtion had never been friendly toward living beings. Its horizons were bloodshot with thick purple clouds that constantly tore apart under the pressure of electrical storms. The surface crackled under strange metallic sand that remembered centuries of warfare. Someone long ago had said that Odtion was a planet that remembers, and those who stayed long enough on it felt as if the sand under their hands truly whispered, sometimes warnings, sometimes threats. That night, the whisper turned into a scream. Plasma jets ripped through the sky like endless lightning. Laser beams cut through the darkness in long, glowing lines that left behind the scorched smell and the clatter of molten metal. And among those hellish colors, beneath collapsed stone and the remnants of a former lookout tower, in shelter that crumbled more each minute, 2 soldiers crawled. They no longer ran. They no longer stood up. They no longer had the strength. Ralde and Sergeant Zivko had for hours been part of a line that was melting like wax under the sun. It was their last foothold. A dialogue of destiny. Darl, this is not going well, Zivko said, his voice sounding as if someone had poured sand through it. His face was scratched, his uniform torn, and his eyes were dull, sluggishly focused on something behind Ralde, on a horizon that perhaps no longer existed. It's not, Ralde confirmed without emotion. Sometimes a man becomes so tired that even fear retreats before exhaustion. Our losses are enormous. The energy shield is nearly gone, and the astro-defense robot... He didn't finish the sentence. They both knew. The robot was dead. A giant of metal alloy more than 4 meters tall, designed to stop an entire squad of enemy units, now stood frozen like a statue. Useless. And yet it held enough weaponry to save the entire sector. I know. Darlo replied slowly, quietly, almost in a whisper. Then he turned, following with his eyes the long, broken trail of smoke stretching toward the farthest points of their position. Through the thick dust, they could see another segment of the shield flash, then go out. We have to hold out until reinforcements arrive? Will they even arrive? Zivko interrupted. If only we could somehow make that dumb robot work again. It's got arms in it for an entire battalion, and now just a heap of old scrap. The technical team? Darla asked, though he already knew the answer. Nothing, Zivko replied. Communication is jammed. Between us and them is now a sea of laser fire and plasma jets, and you know the shield is on its last breath. Ralde ran his tongue across dry lips. For a moment he thought he felt the taste of blood, though he couldn't tell whether it was his own or the enemy's. Check the northern and eastern sides of the shield and see who's still breathing, he said quietly. I'll head toward the western and southern sides and try to reach the technicians. Understood. Zivko saluted, the motion weak but sincere. Ralde smiled, tired, brief but friendly. Carry on, my friend. And so they parted, crawling through the dust of Odtion like 2 wounded beasts that still refused to surrender. The path to the technical team. Odtion did not protect its soldiers. It was a world that attacked anyone who dared step onto it, and not only because of the enemy. The ground sometimes vibrated strangely, as if something was moving beneath the surface. Blue light seeped from the cracks, and tiny metallic insects, ferroacritus, as they called them, occasionally darted out from hidden holes, burying themselves into uniforms, and trying to chew through cables, fabric, even skin. Ralde knew this. That's why he moved slowly, carefully. Every motion matched the rhythm of the storm raging above them. Several times he was forced to lie completely flat as red laser lines sliced through the air above him, accompanied by ultrasonic screeches that stabbed into his eardrums. But he succeeded. After 10 painful minutes, or perhaps an hour, he had lost track, he finally reached the technical team. The sight did not inspire hope. 3 technicians hid behind the remains of a pallet that had once held replacement modules for the robot. Their uniforms were torn, their hands smeared with oil, and their eyes wide like those who had stared at death for too long at close range. What's with this hunk of junk? Ralde asked, pointing at the motionless robot. The chief technician, Cordell, wiped his face with his hand and fixed his gaze on Ralde. He was older, with deep wrinkles carved into his forehead like maps of past defeats. Captain, it's the impulse transfer. Be clear, Cordell sighed. The quartz activator gives only half a cycle. The microprocessors inside require a full cycle. Without it, they can't execute instructions. Only half a cycle? Ralde repeated thoughtfully. In his mind, a spark lit, one that had not appeared in years. What data bus width is needed for transfer? 8-bit is enough, with a 16-bit address bus, the technician replied. But, without a full clock, no ultra-generation microprocessor will function. Maybe not ultra-generation, but... Ralde paused. He himself could hardly believe he was about to say what followed. Wait here. Keep your heads down. Captain? Cordell looked at him confused. I'm going to the storage. He didn't say what he was looking for, because he wasn't even sure it would work. The storage of memories. The storage wasn't far, but the path to it was hell. From the moment Ralde left the technical position, the enemy attack intensified. It seemed as if the opposing sensors sensed that a single moving dot existed somewhere, and they directed all their force toward it. A plasma jet struck the wall near his head and turned it into glowing mush. Ralde barely avoided it. He rolled through trenches, slid over dust, slammed his shoulders into metal beams of the ruined station. By the time he reached the storage, he was bruised, with fatigue etched across his entire face. He stepped inside. It was dark. The dim light of his flashlight shimmered across piles of old parts, cables, boxes, and personal items soldiers were allowed to bring on missions. Ralde stepped deeper. His storage unit was at the back, a small metal box with Ralde Private written on it in marker. He began digging. Where are you? Where are you? Damn it! He muttered as he pulled out cables, old video game toys, pieces of electronics, everything he had collected for years. And then he saw it. He laughed despite the smoke in the air. There you are, he exhaled, and in that instant, a wave of nostalgia washed over him so strongly that he momentarily forgot about the war. He pulled out a box. It was shaped like a bread box, the kind his parents used to keep things in. But it wasn't an ordinary box. It had Commodore 64 written on it, and it had a keyboard. It was his old friend, a friend from childhood, from school days, from the world before the army, before wars, before planets like Odtion. Ralde slowly opened the box. I'm sorry to do this to you, my friend, but now you're going to save our skins. He pulled out a small rectangular piece of plastic with metal pins sticking out on all sides. It was perfect in its simplicity, almost childish compared to the brutal ultra-technology of the 34th century. The 6510 microprocessor, the heart of the old Commodore 64. Ralde kissed it like a relic, and it was time to return. Salvation from the past. The return was even harder than the trip there. Halfway to the technical team, Ralde felt a sharp pain in his shoulder. A piece of shrapnel grazed him, ripping through his uniform. He bit his lip to keep from crying out and continued crawling. He knew there was no time. When he finally arrived, the technicians were already preparing to retreat. The shield was flickering, whitish, almost transparent. One more hit and it would collapse. Captain, you're wounded, one technician said. It doesn't matter, Ralde waved it off. We have something more important. He raised the processor. Cordell blinked. What on earth is that? The 6510 microprocessor. Ralde said proudly, as if presenting a royal jewel. It belonged to my old Commodore 64, but what you need to know is... He paused, raised it high. It needs only half a cycle. The technicians stared. Half a cycle? A young engineer repeated. But that's impossible. Ultraprocessors require too much, Ralde cut him off. This one runs on half if we connect it properly. But that's prehistoric, Cordell whispered. Prehistoric but functional, Ralde said. The technicians exchanged glances. Their eyes no longer held complete hopelessness. Now there was a spark of curiosity, a glimmer of belief. Let's go, Cordell said. Connect the quartz half-clock to its input. Attach the 8-line bus, address bus, we'll improvise. Captain, hold the lamp. And they began working. The soldering iron glowed like a tiny flame of hope. The sparks from the wires looked like small stars in the storm. The battle noise outside mixed with the soft clicking of connectors and long sighs of concentration. Everything was shaking, but they continued. And then Something happened. The robot moved, first barely noticeably, then a little more, and then its eyes lit up. Bluish. Alive. "Activate it," Ralde shouted. Cordell slammed the main command, the awakening of the steel beast. The astro-defense robot model AST-09 Herald was not designed to operate with old microprocessors. It was built for 64-bit instruction blocks processed at trillion cycle speeds. But now, thanks to the little 6510, it operated slower, heavily, as if it were breathing for the first time. But it operated. The robot straightened. In its joints, one could hear twitching and vibrations that showed half the system was fighting the other half. But the half-clock kept it alive, and the half-clock was all they needed. Enemy projections appeared through its visor. Depending on what information the little 6510 managed to process, it would slowly raise its weapons, dual plasma cannon and projectile recycler, and advance. The first burst was too strong, the second, too high, the third, too wide. But the fourth hit directly in the center of the enemy line. And then, chaos erupted. The line of salvation. The enemy was technologically advanced but reliant on perfect systems. A disturbance in timing, magnetic interference, or an energy explosion, all these could disrupt their attack. And a robot operating on imperfect cycles was, in fact, the worst possible enemy for them. Mistimed bursts shattered their energy dampeners. Shots that occasionally failed created false signals. Chaotic artillery broke their perfect formation, and the enemy retreated. They did not want to. They did not expect to, but they had no choice. Herald advanced. It burned 15 enemy units, stopped their initiative, allowed the rest of the unit to regroup, and then finally, reinforcements appeared on the horizon in the form of the light-horned Falcon fleet. The enemy scattered like dust before a storm. Odtion fell silent. Briefly, after the battle. When the smoke settled, when the last lights of plasma faded, when the tones of metal finally quieted, Ralde sat beside the motionless Herald. The 6510 processor was still connected, and still warm. Cordell approached him. "Captain, honestly, I don't understand how you pulled this off," Ralde smiled. "Old man, my good Cordell, old technology has a soul. But still, learn this," Ralde cut him off. "Sometimes what is old is actually perfect because it was made simple, solid, with the idea to last, and what lasts often saves a life." Cordell nodded, then quietly added, "It's really useful having someone with this kind of knowledge." Ralde smiled. "Not knowledge, my friend. This was heart. My C-64 taught me about the world before I knew anything. It taught me patience, logic, but also the wonder that appears when you build something yourself." Zivko and Darla approached. "Captain, the robot is calling you," Darla said with a half-smile. Ralde turned. Herald, with one blinking eye still functional, muttered in a synthetic voice, "Thank you." Ralde smiled wider than ever. Epilogue. The revival of the past. In the hours that followed, as the wounded were treated and the territory secured, one small piece of plastic and metal sat in a box beside Ralde, the 6510 microprocessor, scratched, burned, but functional. And as the clouds on the sky of Odtion slowly parted, revealing stars pushing through the vacuum of darkness, Ralde knew one thing. Some things from the past should never be forgotten. Because sometimes they save the day. End of log for space date, Zenith 22250 421